r/TrueOffMyChest. My friend owes me $3,000 and ghosted me after I helped them. Hashtag the block. I stared at my phone screen for the 100th time that day, my thumb hovering over the message thread that no longer existed. The last text from Maya sat in my memory like a splinter I couldn't remove. Thank you so much. You literally saved my mom's life. I could never repay this. That was 3 months ago. Now, the thread was gone. She deleted the entire conversation, or maybe she blocked me before I even realized what was happening. The discovery came when I tried to reach out to confirm we were still on for her mom's recovery dinner. 360 days of friendship, gone. Along with $3,000 of my carefully hoarded savings. I set my phone down on the library table with more force than necessary, earning a glare from the grad student across from me who was clearly in the throes of dissertation despair. I knew the look well. I was joining that club faster than I'd anticipated, and not by choice. You okay? I looked up to find my lab partner, Devin, holding 2 sad-looking coffee cups from the library cafe. He set one in front of me, the steam rising like a flag of surrender. Define okay, I said, accepting the coffee anyway. Devin pulled up a chair, his lanky frame folding into it with the kind of boneless ease only someone in their mid-20s with no back problems could manage. This about Maya. I shouldn't have been surprised that he knew. Devin had been there when I'd first told him about loaning the money. He'd also been there 3 weeks ago when I realized she blocked me. He'd actually been the one to notice it first when he tried to tag her in a meme about terrible roommate situations. She's in Mexico, I said, hearing the bitterness in my own voice and hating it. Tulum, specifically. Staying at an all-inclusive resort. She posted about it this morning. Did she now? Devin leaned back, his expression darkening into something righteous on my behalf. 4 days. The caption was, so blessed, so grateful for this life update. Blessed. Devin. She's blessed while I'm literally calculating whether I can afford to buy a second-hand spectrometer or eat more than oatmeal for the next month. The situation was almost comical in its injustice. Almost. If it wasn't so genuinely catastrophic for my academic timeline and my mental health. Let me back up. Maya and I had been best friends since we were 8 years old. 8. That's 18 years of sleepovers, secrets, terrible fashion choices we both agreed never to speak of again, and the kind of intimacy that comes from knowing someone's family as well as you know your own. Her mother, Patricia, had been there for some of my worst moments. When my parents' divorce got ugly, I'd spent 3 weeks at their house. When I bombed the SATs the first time, Patricia made me her famous lasagna and helped me study the second time around. So when Maya called me in tears 6 months ago, voice cracking with panic about her mom's emergency surgery, I didn't hesitate. Didn't run the numbers. Didn't think about the thesis research fund I'd been building for 2 years, penny by penny, through Tang, through freelance science writing gigs, through not going out with other grad students, through all those small sacrifices that add up. I just said yes. I can pay you back, Maya had promised, her words tumbling over each other. I swear, I'll pay you back as soon as the insurance claim comes through. It's going to take a few months, maybe, but I promise. You're my best friend. I would never screw you over. Those words were seared into my brain now, played on repeat like a song you hate but can't get out of your head. The insurance claim came through, apparently. Just not to me. Instead, what I got was a slow-motion realization that something was wrong. First, it was the delayed responses to texts. Then the excuses about being busy with work. Then, and I remember this moment with crystalline clarity, the moment I saw her on Instagram at a restaurant with a group of people I didn't recognize, all of them dressed up and smiling, and she hadn't responded to my text from that morning asking if she was free for coffee. That's when I tried to call her. Went straight to a voicemail that was full. Then I tried again the next day. Same thing. And the next time I looked at her Instagram, something had shifted. She'd either blocked me or unfollowed me, the effect was the same. She was gone. It took me another week to fully process that I'd been blocked, not unfollowed. Devin had to show me by logging out and checking on a different account. That's when the real panic set in. I'd reached out through mutual friends. Carefully casual at first, hey, haven't heard from Maya in a while, is she okay, then gradually more direct. Marcus, one of our college friends, finally told me what he'd heard through the grapevine. Maya had said something about needing to make a clean break from toxic people in her life, and that I was too negative and draining. Me. Toxic. For giving her $3,000. The vacation photos had come 2 weeks later. Maya in a bikini, pina colada in hand, her arm around someone who looked like he'd stepped out of a catalog. Expensive watch, expensive smile, clearly expensive everything. The comments section was full of fire emojis and living your best life, queen energy. Her latest post, the one from this morning, showed her in a designer sundress standing in front of an oceanside villa. The caption read, grateful for new beginnings and people who actually deserve my energy sparkles. I'd stared at that post for probably 5 minutes, feeling something in my chest twist and break and rearrange into something uglier than it had been before. So what are you going to do? Devin asked, pulling me back to the present moment. To the library. To the cold coffee and the harsh fluorescent lights and the reality of my situation. I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about the fact that Maya's new boyfriend worked in finance. That he was connected to people in power. That my best friend since childhood had decided I was expendable, but she'd kept her Instagram public. That everyone we'd ever known in common could see exactly how well she was doing without me, how little my money, my sacrifice, had apparently mattered. I don't know yet, I said finally. But I was already thinking about it. Already turning the problem over in my mind like a Rubik's Cube I needed to solve. Devin studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Well, whenever you figure it out, I'm here. I picked up the coffee and took a sip of the cold, bitter liquid. Thanks, I said. Don't thank me yet, he said. Something tells me this story isn't over. Hashtag the investigation. That night, I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I went down the rabbit hole. It started innocently enough. I was just scrolling through Maya's Instagram, the way you do when you're procrastinating on actual work and your brain is too wired with anger to sleep. But then I started clicking on the people she was tagged with. The new boyfriend. His friends. His family. His company's website. His name was Trevor Harrington, and he worked for some kind of venture capital firm in the city. The kind of place where people made the kind of money that made my $3,000 sacrifice look like pocket change. He had a LinkedIn profile that went on for days: boarding school, Ivy League, internships at places I'd never heard of but could tell from context were important. I found myself doing what I'd never done before. I searched for him on the firm's website. Found his photo in their Leadership Development Program section. Read his bio. Discovered he had a Twitter account where he posted motivational quotes about integrity in business and building trust with clients. The irony was so sharp it drew blood. Then I made the mistake of looking at Maya's tagged photos more carefully. Because there, in a photo from 2 weeks ago at some kind of upscale brunch situation, was Maya with Trevor's mother. And next to that was a family reunion photo from last summer where Trevor was surrounded by what had to be his parents and siblings, all of them at some kind of exclusive golf club. I sat back in my desk chair, my laptop screen casting that eerie blue light across my dark dorm room, and felt something crystallize inside me. This wasn't just a friend who'd ghosted me. This was someone who deliberately disappeared into a new life. A better life, apparently. One where her old friend with the outdated clothes and the research budget struggles didn't exist. One where she could pretend her mother hadn't nearly died and that she hadn't promised to repay me. My phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Hey, random question," his text read. "You haven't told anyone about the money you lent Maya, right?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the message for a solid 30 seconds before typing back, "Why?" "Because she's been telling people you lent her money as some kind of investment thing. Like you were trying to get her to pay you back with interest." I heard it from Keisha, who heard it from someone at Maya's work. "Just wanted to give you a heads up in case it becomes a thing." I read the message 3 times, each time feeling a new layer of betrayal settle over me like ash. She was rewriting the story. I called Marcus immediately. Screw the late hour. He picked up on the 3rd ring, voice groggy. "Hey, sorry, but I need to know exactly what you heard," I said, not bothering with pleasantries. Marcus yawned, then seemed to wake up faster when he registered the edge in my voice. "Okay, so Keisha said that Maya mentioned you'd loaned her money, but that you'd been kind of aggressive about getting it back. That you kept pressuring her about the timeline. I don't know the exact details, it was kind of a game of telephone situation. But the impression Keisha got was that you were being unreasonable." I hadn't asked her for the money once, I said, and I could hear how quiet and dangerous my voice had become. "Not once, Marcus. She said the insurance would take a few months. I've just been waiting." I know. That's why I'm telling you. I know you better than that. But you know how people are, they're gonna believe whatever version of the story sounds the most interesting." After I hung up, I sat in the dark of my room for a long time. The screen of my laptop had gone to sleep, but I could still see the faint outline of Trevor Harrington's smiling face burned into my retinas. This was worse than being forgotten. This was being rewritten. This was being turned into the villain of her own story. I got out of bed and opened my laptop again. Started a new search, small claims court $3,000. It was 2 a.m. when I started composing a detailed email to myself outlining everything that had happened. Every text. Every date. Every promised timeline. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed to document it. I knew I needed to have proof of the original agreement, the original promise, the original betrayal. By 3 a.m., I'd found a subreddit dedicated to people dealing with unpaid loans from friends. The stories were harrowing. People who'd lost tens of thousands. People who'd lost their houses. People who'd lost their families trying to reclaim money that had never been repaid. But also people who'd won. People who'd taken their friends to court. People who'd left reviews on social media documenting what had happened. People who'd contacted the person's employer about their history of financial irresponsibility. People who'd fought back. I was still reading at 4 a.m. when my roommate Jessica came home from her shift at the hospital, nearly tripping over me in the dark. "Jesus Christ, what are you doing?" she hissed, turning on the light. I blinked against the sudden brightness, realizing probably for the first time since sitting down that I looked insane. Hair in a messy bun, wearing yesterday's clothes, the kind of feverish expression that screamed, spiraling grad student, to anyone with eyes. "Research," I said, which was technically true. Jessica set down her bag and crossed her arms. The Maya research or the actual research? I should have been surprised that she knew, but Jessica was the kind of person who just noticed things. She'd been there when I'd first gotten the call. She'd listened to me talk through the decision to loan the money. She'd also been there when I'd realized I'd been blocked. Both, I admitted. Neither. I don't know. She sat down on the edge of my desk, exhaustion written across her face in capital letters, and studied my expression. "Okay, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear me. You're at the part of this where it starts to feel like it's about justice, right? But that's the most dangerous part. That's where people get hurt." "She's hurt me," I said quietly. "I know. But there's a difference between defending yourself and whatever this is starting to feel like." She gestured at my laptop, at the chaos of open tabs, at me in general. I didn't respond because I didn't know how. Because some part of me, the part that was still awake at 4 a.m., still furious, still calculating, wasn't sure she was right. The part of me that was planning something was starting to feel very justified indeed. Hashtag the turning point. Jessica left me alone after that, probably figuring I was beyond reach for the night. She was right. I kept digging. By the time sunlight started creeping under my dorm room curtains, I compiled what I could only describe as a dossier. Screenshots of Maya's Instagram posts with timestamps. Her new boyfriend's professional profile. The vacation photos with location tags that proved she was spending money freely while ignoring my existence. I'd even found an old text thread between us from 4 years ago where she talked about how much she valued our friendship, how I was the only one who really got her. The contrast made me feel sick. But there was something else too. Something I'd almost missed while scrolling through Trevor's LinkedIn profile. A comment thread on one of his posts about financial responsibility in emerging markets. Someone had called him out for unethical practices at his firm, nothing proven, just allegations, but enough to make me pause. What kind of person was Maya aligning herself with? What did that say about her judgment? I should have slept. I didn't. Instead, I showered, changed clothes, and walked to campus with my laptop bag slung over my shoulder like I was preparing for war. My 10 a.m. seminar was a disaster. Professor Chin kept asking me to clarify my points, and I realized halfway through that I'd been rambling about something completely unrelated to my thesis. The look on her face, concerned, slightly annoyed, told me everything I needed to know about how I was coming across. After class, I headed to the library not to study, but to sit in a far corner where I'd be less visible and continued my research. That's where David found me around noon. David was one of my cohort mates, a guy who'd always been friendly but distant, the type who showed up to seminars and group projects but didn't hang out much otherwise. He slid into the chair across from me without asking, which immediately made me defensive. Hey, he said, keeping his voice low so as not to disturb the studying undergrads around us. I heard you were having some issues with Maya. Thought you should know something. My entire body went rigid. Who told you that? Does it matter? Look, I'm in Pilates with Trevor's sister, right? She mentioned that Maya's told their family you're basically a predatory lender. That you're threatening her. That you've been contacting her family members. That's a complete lie, I said, my voice coming out sharper than intended. A nearby student looked up from her textbook with annoyance. I lowered my voice. I haven't contacted anyone. She blocked me. I haven't even tried to reach her. David held up his hands. I'm just telling you what I heard. But here's the thing, Trevor's family is well connected. His dad's on the board of the university hospital. His mom sits on the alumni council. If this turns into a he said she said situation and you're the one who looks unstable. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. So what are you suggesting? I asked quietly. I'm suggesting that whatever you're planning, you might want to think about the consequences. Not for her. For you. He left after that, disappearing back into the stacks before I could respond. I sat there for a long time, my hands shaking slightly as I stared at my closed laptop. The irony was suffocating. Maya had spent 2 weeks ghosting me, but somehow I was the threatening one. How had the narrative flipped so completely? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: stop contacting mutual friends about Maya or I will pursue legal action for harassment. I stared at it. The number wasn't registered to anything I could identify, but the tone was unmistakably lawyer adjacent. Professional. Threatening. Real. Had I contacted mutual friends? Had I done anything that could be construed as that? No. Marcus had come to me. Keisha had come to Marcus. David had volunteered information. But there was the problem in miniature, I couldn't prove that. It would be my word against theirs, and apparently theirs was already being written by someone with better resources and fewer scruples. I picked up my phone to call Marcus, then stopped. What if calling him was considered contacting a mutual friend? What if every attempt to defend myself was being weaponized against me? The panic was starting to feel like a legitimate response. I packed up my stuff and walked back to my dorm in a daze. Jessica would be asleep, she worked nights at the hospital and slept during the day. My other roommate Sarah was probably in classes. The dorm room was exactly as I'd left it, my laptop still open on my desk, half-finished coffee growing a skin of mold on the windowsill. I sat on my bed and made a list. Not of things I wanted to do to Maya or Trevor, but of what I'd actually done since discovering the ghost. 1. Scrolled through social media, not against the law. 2. Researched small claims court, not against the law. 3. Looked into their professional backgrounds, not against the law. 4. Documented communications, not against the law. 5. Talked to Marcus when he initiated contact, not against the law. Then I made another list of what Maya had done. 1. Blocked me without explanation. 2. Changed her phone number. 3. Avoided mutual friends rather than address the situation. 4. Lied about the nature of the loan to others. 5. Continued spending money while ignoring her debt. 6. Had someone send me a legal threat. Put that way, I wasn't the problem. But the legal threat was the problem. The threat meant she'd escalated this. The threat meant I needed to think very carefully about my next move. I opened my email and drafted a careful message to the university student ombudsman, explaining the situation in neutral language. Not emotional. Not vengeful. Just facts: the loan, the ghosting, the blocking, the false narrative spreading through mutual friends. I wrote about how this was affecting my academic performance and mental health. I asked what my options were. I read it over 5 times before hitting send. It felt safer than anything else I'd considered. It was institutional. Documented. Appropriate. But even as I hit send, some small voice in the back of my mind whispered that Jessica was right. That I was crossing over from being wronged into being dangerous. That the more I tried to defend myself, the more ammunition I was giving to the other side. My phone buzzed again. Different number. Different message: we know what you're planning. Stop now. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just sat there in the quiet of my dorm room and realized I had no idea how to get out of this anymore. Hashtag the meeting. The email from the student ombudsman came back faster than I expected. Not what I hoped for, but faster. Asterisk, thank you for reaching out. Given the legal nature of your situation, I'd recommend consulting with the university's legal services office or an external attorney before proceeding. The ombudsman's role is to mediate administrative disputes, not financial disagreements between students. However, we can discuss how this is impacting your academic progress. Please schedule an appointment. Asterisk. Translation, you're on your own. I stared at the response for 20 minutes before closing my laptop. Legal services. Right. As if I could afford an attorney when I drained my savings account helping someone who decided I didn't exist. The irony was suffocating. That afternoon, I got a call from my mom. Not a text, an actual voice call, which meant something was wrong. Honey, I just got the weirdest message request on Facebook, she said, and my stomach dropped. Someone claiming to be Maya's mother. She's saying you've been harassing her daughter, and she wanted to give me context before I heard the story from you. What is happening? I explained everything. The loan, the ghosting, the blocking, the lies spreading through mutual friends. I explained the legal threats. I explained that I hadn't contacted anyone except Marcus, and he'd come to me. Jesus, my mom said. Have you considered just letting this go? She owes me $3,000. I know, but... And she's lying about me. To mutual friends. To her mother. To people I don't even know. I understand that, but sweetheart, you're a graduate student. You have a thesis to write. You have a future. Is $3,000 worth derailing all of that? The question sat between us like a living thing. I don't know, I admitted. She sighed. Talk to a lawyer. Just one consultation. See what your actual legal options are. Maybe hearing it from a professional will help you decide if this is worth pursuing. After we hung up, I pulled up the university's legal services page. The appointment slots were booked through the end of the month. I tried searching for local attorneys who did small claims or debt recovery. Most wanted retainers. Most wanted more than the debt itself was worth. I was trapped in a perfect catch-22. I couldn't afford to pursue the money, and I couldn't afford to let it go. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Asterisk, hey, are you okay? Someone told me you're planning to report Maya to the school or something. I didn't say anything to anyone, I swear. I'm worried about you. Asterisk. I texted back, asterisk, I'm fine. Just trying to figure out what to do. Asterisk. Asterisk, well, whatever you're planning, be careful. Maya's family is apparently furious. Like, talking to lawyers furious. Asterisk. I knew they were. The texts proved it. But something in Marcus's message bothered me. The phrasing. Whatever you're planning, as if the mere fact of my existence was now perceived as a threat, as if my breathing in their direction constituted a hostile action. By Thursday, the story had metastasized. I overheard two undergrads in a coffee shop near campus talking about that girl who lent money to her friend and then threatened her when she couldn't pay it back. The details were completely wrong, but that didn't matter. The narrative was already written, and I wasn't the author. Jessica found me that evening sitting on our dorm room floor, back against my bed, staring at nothing. You look like you're about to do something stupid, she said, setting down her hospital bag. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, I admitted. She sat down next to me, our shoulders almost touching. I called a lawyer friend of my mom's. Just asked a hypothetical question. She said if you're being threatened, you should document everything and consider filing a police report. For what? Someone texting me to stop contacting people I haven't contacted. For threats. For harassment. For whatever this is. And then what? I report Maya to the police, and suddenly I'm the villain who called the cops on someone over money. Jessica didn't have an answer for that. Friday morning, I got called into my department chair's office. Professor Hartley's assistant just said it was routine, but nothing about a summons from department administration is routine. I sat across from Hartley's desk, trying to look presentable despite having slept maybe 4 hours total that week. She was older, probably mid-60s, with gray hair and a kind of expression that suggested she'd seen worse than whatever I was bringing to her door. I've had a student file a concern, she said without preamble. She's indicated that you've been engaging in harassment and spreading false information about her character. Before I take this further, I want to hear your side. Who filed the concern? I can't disclose that, but I'm sure you have a good idea. I did. But the confirmation still felt like a punch. I told her everything. The loan, the emergency, the ghosting. I showed her screenshots of Maya's Instagram posts showing expensive purchases, the vacation photos. I pulled up the messages I'd received threatening legal action. Hartley listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and folded her hands. Here's what I can tell you, she said. The university has a policy about interpersonal conflicts. If both parties want to mediate, we can facilitate that. If one party is refusing, we can't force them. What we can do is make it very clear to both of you that any further escalation will result in formal disciplinary action. So she can lie about me, but I can't defend myself. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the appearance of ongoing conflict between graduate students creates a hostile environment. It needs to stop. It will stop if she pays me back or admits what she did. Hartley's expression softened slightly. I understand you're angry. You have a right to be angry. But anger is a luxury you can't afford right now. Not with your thesis on the line. Not with 2 years of work hanging in the balance. After I left her office, I felt something shift inside me. Not acceptance, exactly. But something closer to clarity. Jessica had been right. My mom had been right. Hartley had been right. The only person who seemed to think my path made sense was the version of me that hadn't slept in days and was slowly unraveling in real time. That evening, I was sitting in the library when David found me again. He looked uncomfortable. I just wanted to give you a heads up, he said quietly. Trevor's sister mentioned that Maya's considering filing a restraining order. She's documenting everything, claiming you're creating an unsafe environment. I felt the air leave my lungs. I haven't done anything, I whispered. I know that. But on paper, on her timeline, you've looked her up online, researched her boyfriend, contacted people asking about her. To someone reading that statement for the first time, it could look obsessive. Yeah. He left, and I sat there in the middle of the library, surrounded by people studying for exams they'd pass, for futures they'd have, and realized I was losing mine by trying to defend it. That night, I didn't make a list. I didn't research anything. I didn't scroll through anyone's social media. I just sat in the dark of my dorm room and tried to figure out how to step back from a cliff I hadn't even realized I was standing on. #Chunk5. The restraining order threat hung over me like a guillotine blade suspended on a fraying rope. I spent Saturday in a fog, going through the motions of existence without actually living through any of it. I showered. I ate a protein bar I didn't taste. I opened my thesis document and stared at the same paragraph for 3 hours without reading a single word. By Sunday morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to talk to an actual lawyer, not because I wanted to pursue Maya, but because I needed to understand what it meant that she was considering pursuing me. If she filed a restraining order, I needed to know what that would look like, what it would cost, whether it would actually stick. I found a legal aid clinic that offered free consultations on Monday afternoons. The office was in a strip mall between a tax preparation service and a place that sold discounted phone cases. The lawyer's name was Mr. Chen, and he was probably in his 50s, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and the demeanor of someone who'd heard variations of the same story 1,000 times. I told him everything. Again. By this point, the narrative had become so rehearsed it felt like I was reciting someone else's tragedy. Okay, he said, leaning back in his chair. Let me break down what you're facing. First, the money. $3,000 is small claims territory, which is good. You wouldn't need an attorney to pursue it. The bad news is that small claims is slow, expensive relative to the amount, and requires the defendant to actually have assets to collect from if you win. Has she paid you anything? No. Nothing. Has she acknowledged the debt in writing? I pulled up the text messages from the day after I'd given her the money. Asterisk, can't thank you enough. I'll pay you back as soon as I can. Asterisk, that was it. That was my evidence. That's something, he said. Now, regarding the restraining order threat. That's where it gets complicated. A restraining order, or what we call a protection order, requires the person filing it to demonstrate that you pose a credible threat or that you've engaged in harassment. Looking at what you've described, you've had no direct contact with her since she blocked you, correct? Correct. You haven't contacted her family, her boyfriend, or her employers directly. No. Someone else brought the information to me. But you did research her boyfriend in social media, and you did mention the situation to mutual friends. I nodded miserably. That's the gray area, he continued. If she frames it correctly, if she characterizes your research and sharing of information as obsessive tracking and harassment, a judge might grant a temporary restraining order depending on the jurisdiction and the judge's interpretation. You'd then have an opportunity to contest it at a hearing. So she could get a restraining order against me even though I haven't done anything wrong. Legally, that's not quite accurate, but practically. He removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. It's possible. Temporary restraining orders are meant to be granted quickly and conservatively. She'd have to write a declaration claiming that you're creating an unsafe environment through surveillance and information sharing. Whether a judge would agree depends on how she frames it and how good she is at making herself sound credible. My chest felt tight. What happens if she gets one? If she gets a temporary one, you get served with papers. You'd have the opportunity to appear at a hearing, usually within 2 weeks, where both of you present your sides. If the judge doesn't renew it, it expires. If they do, it becomes a longer-term protective order, usually 6 months to a year. You'd have restrictions on contacting her, going near her, or in some cases, even being in the same location. But I haven't done anything. I believe you. But I haven't done anything is different from I cannot be perceived as threatening. There's a gap between those two things, and that gap is where restraining orders live. I left his office with his pro bono paperwork. He'd offered to represent me if it came to a hearing, which was something, and a head full of new nightmares. A restraining order would destroy my social life. It would show up on background checks. It would confirm everything Maya was saying about me being obsessed, being a threat. Even if I wanted a hearing, even if the judge dismissed her claim, I'd still have been taken to court. I'd still have the paperwork. The narrative would still exist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and did the math that Mr. Chen had been too polite to state outright. Fighting a restraining order would cost me more than $3,000. Even with free legal representation, I'd lose work hours, I'd lose sleep, I'd lose focus on my thesis. I'd already lost money on research materials. I'd already lost my peace of mind. By 2 a.m., I was on my laptop, doing the thing I promised myself I wouldn't do anymore. I pulled up Maya's Instagram. She'd posted a new photo, a sunset from what looked like a rooftop bar, with her new boyfriend's arm around her shoulders. The caption was just a heart emoji and a location tag. Cancun. Cancun. She was in Cancun. While I was sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. trying to figure out how to survive the aftermath of helping her. I closed the app. I texted Jessica, "Are you awake?" She responded within 30 seconds, which meant she probably wasn't, but she would be soon. Asterisk, now I am. You okay? Asterisk. Asterisk, no. Can we talk? Asterisk. She came back to the dorm within an hour, still wearing the clothes she'd apparently fallen asleep in. She didn't ask questions. She just sat down on my bed and waited. I think I need to let this go, I said. I think I need to send her a message saying I'm dropping it. All of it. I won't pursue the money. I won't talk about it to anyone. I won't look at her social media. And maybe then she won't file the restraining order, and maybe then I can actually focus on finishing my degree. Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Do you want to do that? No, I admitted. But I think I have to. Those aren't the same thing. I know. If you message her saying you're dropping it, you're basically admitting guilt. You're letting her win. You're letting her keep the $3,000, the new boyfriend, the vacation in Cancun, and the narrative that you were the problem all along. I know that too. So what do you want to do? I looked at my best friend, sitting in my dorm room at 3 a.m. because I'd asked her to, and realized I didn't have an answer. I wanted to win. I wanted justice. I wanted my $3,000 back and my reputation restored and my life back to normal. But I was beginning to understand that wanting those things and being able to get them were two entirely different propositions. Hashtag chunk 6. Jessica stayed until dawn. We didn't sleep. We just sat there in the half-light of my laptop screen, and she listened while I spiraled through every possible scenario like I was trying to defuse a bomb by considering which wire to cut. If you contact her, it's harassment, I said. If you don't contact her, you're accepting the loss. If you tell people, you're spreading lies. If you don't tell people, you're letting her rewrite the truth. Those aren't all equally true, Jessica said carefully. Aren't they? No. You're catastrophizing. You're creating a maze that doesn't actually exist yet. But by Monday morning, the maze became real. I was walking back from the library when I saw the notification on my phone. A text from an unknown number, which immediately flagged as suspicious. I almost didn't open it. But the preview showed just enough words to hook me. I know what you've been doing. It wasn't from Maya. It was from her new boyfriend, Ryan. Asterisk, stop contacting my girlfriend. Stop spreading lies about her. You're unhinged. If you contact her again, I'm calling the police, asterisk. My stomach dropped like someone had physically yanked it downward. I hadn't contacted her. I hadn't spread anything new. But here was a message from a man I'd never met, from a number I'd never had, telling me to stop. Which meant Maya had given him the number. Which meant she painted me as the aggressor in a narrative I wasn't even actively writing anymore. I should have ignored it. Mr. Chen would have told me to ignore it. Instead, I texted back, asterisk, I haven't contacted her. I haven't done anything, asterisk. He responded in less than a minute, exactly what an obsessed person would say. And then he blocked me. I stood in the middle of the quad, holding my phone, and felt something inside me snap. Not violently. More like a cable that's been fraying finally giving way. All the restraint I'd been practicing, all the discipline of staying quiet and not reaching out, it didn't matter. It didn't matter because the narrative had already been written without me. I was the villain in a story I didn't author, couldn't control, couldn't even defend myself against because defending myself was itself evidence of guilt. That's when I made the mistake. I called Maya's mother. I don't know why. I knew it was wrong the second I was dialing. But I had this thought, this desperate, irrational thought, that if I could just explain to Mrs. Kim that I wasn't the problem, that I was just trying to recover money I'd given in good faith, then maybe she could talk some sense into her daughter. Maybe she could make this stop. The phone rang twice. Hello. Her voice sounded exactly the same as it had 3 years ago when I used to come over to study and she'd bring us snacks and ask about my parents. I'd forgotten how kind she'd sounded back then. It made what I was about to do feel like a betrayal. Mrs. Kim, it's... I know who it is, she said quietly. Maya said you might call. Of course she did. I just wanted to explain. She explained everything to me. About how you've been tracking her online, spreading rumors about her financial situation, contacting her new boyfriend. I didn't. She showed me the messages you sent her friends. I only told them what happened because you wanted them to judge her the way you're judging her. I couldn't get a word in. It was like trying to stop a wave with your hands. I helped raise you alongside my own daughter. I was so proud of you. I told everyone at church about your graduate program, about how smart you were. And this is what you do with that intelligence. You weaponize it against people who care about you. She blocked me, Mrs. Kim. She stole from me. She didn't steal anything. She said you gave her the money. A gift. It was a loan. She said it was a loan. Then take her to court if you think you have a case. But don't come to me trying to turn me against my daughter. Don't come to me with this harassment campaign and expect me to sympathize with you. I'm not trying to turn you against her. I'm trying to get $3,000 that I need back. That's not what this is, Mrs. Kim said, and there was something so disappointed in her voice that it hurt worse than anger would have. This is about revenge. This is about making her suffer because you're suffering. And I won't be a part of it. She hung up. I stood there in the quad, phone still pressed to my ear, and felt the last piece of foundation crumble. Mrs. Kim had been one of the few adults in my childhood who treated me like I mattered. Now she thought I was a stalker. Now she'd probably tell every person in her life, in her church, in her social circle, that I was dangerous. That night, Jessica found me in the library where I'd been sitting for 6 hours, not working on my thesis, just existing in a state of suspended paralysis. You called her mom, Jessica said. It wasn't a question. How did you know? Because you have that look. That look where you've just realized you've made something worse. She thinks I'm a stalker. She thinks I'm harassing her daughter. The boyfriend texted me. Maya told him I was contacting her repeatedly, and I never. I know you didn't. But nobody else will believe that. Nobody else knows the real story. They're only hearing her version, and her version makes me sound insane. Jessica sat down across from me, in the corral where I'd been staring at the same blank document for hours. Here's what I think, she said slowly. I think you need to accept that you can't control the narrative anymore. You lost control of it when she ghosted you. You lost more of it when she blocked you. And you lose a little more every time you try to defend yourself, because anything you do looks like confirmation that she was right about you all along. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept it. Accept that she wins. Maybe, Jessica said. Or maybe you focus on the one thing you can actually control. What's that? Your own life. Your thesis. Your actual future. Not her. Not the money. Not the narrative. Just you. She was right, and I hated it. I hated that the advice made sense. Because accepting it meant accepting that there was no justice coming, no moment of vindication, no way to make people understand that I was the victim here. It meant accepting that sometimes the person who helps you gets nothing. And the person who takes the help gets everything. And there's no courtroom in the world that can fix that. Hashtag chunk 7. I didn't follow Jessica's advice. Not immediately. Not even that week. Instead, I did what I always did when I was in pain, I researched. I created spreadsheets. I made lists of every person Maya and I had mutual contact with, organized by likelihood of believing my side of the story. I documented every message, every screenshot, every interaction. I told myself it was just for my own clarity, my own understanding. But the truth was darker than that. The truth was I was building a case the way a prosecutor builds evidence, except I had no courthouse to present it to. The spreadsheet became an obsession. 73 mutual contacts. I categorized them by relationship closeness and reliability. There was Marcus, who'd known us both since middle school. There was Sarah from the graduate program, who'd actually been there when I first told her about the loan situation. There were people from church, from high school, from various overlapping circles of our lives. Each name represented a potential ally, a potential person who could hear the truth from me directly before they heard the lie from her. I told myself I was just organizing information. I wasn't actually going to contact anyone. I contacted Marcus on Wednesday. I kept the message short. Friendly. Hey, it's been a while. How's everything? I wanted to catch up. Casual. Low pressure. The kind of message that wouldn't seem like I was reaching out with an agenda. He responded the next morning, hey. Good to hear from you. I'm swamped with work stuff, but let's grab coffee sometime soon. And then, because I'm apparently incapable of restraint, I added, actually, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. Have you heard from Maya recently? The response came 2 hours later, and it was shorter, not really. Why? And that's when I should have stopped. That's the moment Jessica's voice should have echoed in my head, telling me I was making something worse. But instead, I typed out a paragraph. Then another. I explained the loan, the ghosting, the blocking. I kept it factual. I didn't use emotional language. I presented it like a case study. Marcus didn't respond for 3 days. When he did, it was a phone call. Hey, man, I'm not really comfortable getting in the middle of whatever's going on with you and Maya, he said, his voice uncomfortable in that specific way that meant he'd already heard her version. But I just want to say, I don't think she'd just take money and disappear. That's not who she is. She did, though, I said. You can ask her. It was a loan for her mom's medical bills. She told me about that. She said you offered to help and she thanked you for it. Right, and then she blocked me on everything without explanation. She said there was some drama with other stuff, and she needed to distance herself from people in your social circle. Other stuff. Other people in my social circle. The vagueness of it felt deliberate, like he was repeating back what he'd been told without actually understanding it himself. Marcus, I need the money back. That's literally all I'm asking for. I'm not asking you to judge her character or anything. I just need to recover my own savings. Then maybe take her to court. I don't know, man. I just can't get involved in this. He hung up, and I realized that reaching out to Marcus hadn't clarified anything for him. It had just made him uncomfortable. Which, in his mind, probably confirmed that I was the problem. Why else would I be calling him about an old loan? But I didn't stop. That was the real problem. I didn't stop. I messaged Sarah. Sarah responded quickly and with genuine sympathy. She even said, I remember you mentioning this before. That's really unfair. But when I asked if she'd heard anything from Maya, if she'd run into her on campus, her responses became shorter. Fewer words. More distance. By the third message, she stopped reading my texts altogether, according to the read receipts. Thursday evening, I got a call from my department advisor, Professor Chen. His voice was level and careful in a way that made me immediately defensive. I wanted to check in with you about how the thesis is progressing, he said. It's been a few weeks since we last met. It's going fine, I said. I've been doing research, working on the methodology section. That's good to hear. I also wanted to check in on something else. One of your classmates mentioned that you've been reaching out to various people asking about a personal matter. A debt situation. My stomach dropped. Who told you that? It doesn't matter who. What matters is that I'm getting the sense that something is affecting your ability to focus on your academic work. Is that true? No, I'm fine. I'm completely focused on my thesis. Because if something is going on, there are resources available to you. Counseling services, mediation if there's a dispute with someone. There's no dispute, I heard myself say, which was absurd because of course there was a dispute. There was a $3,000 dispute. But saying that out loud to my advisor felt like admitting defeat. It felt like proving that whoever had complained to him was right, that I was the obsessed one, the unstable one, the person who couldn't let things go. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment with my hands shaking. The narrative was spreading. I could feel it metastasizing through my social circle, my professional network, like something contagious. Every time I tried to set the record straight, I seemed to confirm the version of me that existed in other people's minds. The desperate person. The obsessive person. The person who couldn't move on. Jessica came over when I called her. She didn't say I told you so, but she didn't need to. It was written on her face. My advisor called me, I said. Someone complained that I'm contacting people about the loan. Okay, Jessica said carefully. So now my advisor thinks I'm unstable. He's probably going to flag it with the department. This could actually affect my graduate standing. Did he say that? Not explicitly. But he wouldn't have called if someone hadn't told him I was being inappropriate. Jessica was quiet for a moment. What if you just stopped? What if you accepted right now that this is what happened, that you won't get the money back, and you actually moved on? I can't just accept it, I said. This is my life. This is my actual financial reality. I have $800 in my savings account because I gave her $3,000. I know. But the money isn't coming back. It's not. You have to accept that. And the longer you spend trying to convince everyone that you're the good guy in this story, the more you actually become the bad guy, because you're making it real. So what, I just let her win. I just let her disappear with my money and rewrite the story so that I'm the crazy one. No, Jessica said quietly. You just let her go. And you rebuild your life without her in it. It sounded so simple when she said it. But simplicity and reality were two different things entirely. Hashtag Chunk 8, The Reckoning. I didn't contact anyone else after that conversation with Jessica. Not because I suddenly had a moment of clarity or because I realized the error of my ways. I stopped because I was afraid. Afraid of what my advisor might think. Afraid of what my colleagues were already saying. Afraid that if I opened my mouth one more time, I'd confirm every suspicion that I was the problem in this story. For 2 weeks, I did nothing. I went to classes. I worked on my thesis. I pretended that the silence of my phone was actually peace. But silence and peace are not the same thing. Silence is just waiting. It's the holding of breath before the plunge. Maya's Instagram updated on a Tuesday. A photo of her at some upscale restaurant with a new girlfriend, the wealthy one whose family apparently owned real estate. They were laughing. Champagne glasses. The caption read, "Grateful for the people who matter most." I didn't share it. I didn't send it to anyone. I just looked at it and something inside me shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like tectonic plates realigning. I realized that for months I'd been trying to convince everyone else of the truth because I couldn't quite convince myself. Every time I told the story, I was performing the role of the wrong person, and each performance felt a little more hollow than the last. Jessica had said the money wasn't coming back. I knew she was right. Small claims court would cost money I didn't have. A lawyer was completely out of reach. The only real option had always been to let it go, and I'd been refusing to do it not because I thought there was a path to recovery, but because accepting the loss meant accepting my own vulnerability. It meant admitting that someone I loved had hurt me, and that sometimes, hurt people just hurt you. There was no narrative where I could make sense of it. There was no spreadsheet of evidence that would change that. I closed my laptop. I went to the bathroom and deleted the spreadsheet. 3 days later, my advisor asked me to come to his office. My heart rate spiked when I got the email. This was it. This was the conversation where they told me I needed to withdraw, where they told me I wasn't fit for graduate school, where everything fell apart. I wanted to check in, Professor Chen said when I sat down. How are you actually doing? And I mean that genuinely. Not about the thesis. About you. Something about the sincerity in his voice made me tell him the truth. I told him about the loan. About the betrayal. About trying to prove to everyone that I was the injured party. I told him that I'd obsessed over it for months. I told him I'd contacted people, made things worse, and that I was sorry. Professor Chen listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Do you know how many graduate students I've worked with who've had a version of this experience? He said. Not the specific details, obviously. But the fundamental loss of trust in someone they cared about. The impulse to explain, to convince, to prove. You're not the first person to struggle with that. It feels like I'm losing my mind, I said. You're not. You're just being human. But here's what I'm going to say, and I say this as someone who has some distance from the situation. The best thing you can do for your academic career right now is to actually let this go. Not because you're weak. Not because she wins. But because your thesis deserves your best work, and right now, part of your brain is still in the story with her, trying to make it make sense. It won't. Some people will disappoint you. Some losses you won't recover from. And the only way through that is acceptance, not explanation. I nodded. I couldn't speak without my voice cracking. I'm going to recommend you to our counseling services, he continued. Not because I think you're unstable. But because I think talking to someone professionally about trust and betrayal might actually help you move forward. Would you be open to that? I said yes, and I meant it. 6 weeks later, I was sitting in a counselor's office, not because I was broken, but because I needed help understanding what had happened to me and how to exist in the world as someone who couldn't trust blindly anymore. Dr. Morrison was a woman in her 50s who didn't offer platitudes. She asked questions instead. What do you think you wanted from reaching out to all those people? She asked in our 3rd session. Validation, I said immediately. I wanted them to tell me I was right. Right about what? That I was a good friend. That I didn't deserve to be treated this way. Did you get that validation? No. I made things worse. I became the person people wanted to avoid. Because I was asking people to choose sides when they didn't want to. Dr. Morrison nodded. What if I told you that you don't need anyone else's validation to know that you were a good friend? What if what happened to you was just something that happened, without requiring an audience to confirm its significance? I thought about that for days. My thesis started moving forward. Real work. The kind of work that made me remember why I'd wanted to do this in the first place. I was researching something that mattered, that could matter, that didn't require anyone's permission to be important. 3 months after I'd stopped contacting people, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. He looked uncomfortable at first, then he relaxed when I just smiled and waved. Hey man, he said, coming over. How's everything? Good, I said, and I meant it. Really good. Thesis is coming together. That's awesome. I'm glad things are moving in the right direction for you. We talked for 10 minutes about normal things. Work. His new apartment. Nothing about Maya. When he left, I realized I didn't feel bitter about the fact that he'd chosen to believe her version of things. People believe the version of the story they need to believe. They absorb the narrative that fits most comfortably into their own lives. That wasn't my problem anymore. 6 months later, I ran into Maya at the library. We didn't speak. I was shelving books as part of my work-study position, and she was studying in the corner. We both pretended we didn't see each other, and somehow, that felt like the right ending. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just the acknowledgement that some chapters close quietly, without resolution, without the satisfaction of a final word. The thesis progressed. The university eventually approved my proposal. I still had $800 in my savings account, which I was slowly rebuilding. And for the first time in almost a year, I woke up without thinking about Maya first. That's when I realized the $3,000 wasn't really the issue anymore. It never had been. The issue was that I needed someone to tell me I was good enough, that I was right, that my sacrifice mattered. And I finally learned to tell myself that. It didn't fix the loss, but it made the loss possible to carry.